So, first of all, thanks, Donna, for doing this. This is wonderful. Thank you, Jack. It's it's pretty special to be here and honor a great guy like Brad. For me, Brad represents a lot of things for me. We definitely had a love-hate relationship. We were tough, tenacious, all those things, but I'd won 2 championships. I'd won 2 Camel GT championships, IMSA championships, won a bunch of races, and was looking for that next step, and really, really wanted to drive for Chevrolet. I was probably looking back a mistake. I should have probably wanted to drive for Ford, but I wanted to drive for Chevrolet. And so, like Bob Gosh mentioned in a roundabout way, I got introduced to Brad and got the opportunity to make a plea to drive for him. And he looked at my record, and we met, and we were down at Daytona. One of the things he did for me that was really great is, back in those days, I was kind of, crazy and partied a little bit, and whatever. And one of the things I did was smoke. I didn't smoke a lot, but I did smoke, right? Everybody smoked in those days, back in those days. So we're sitting at Daytona, and we're in the afternoon, we left the racetrack, and we're sitting there, and we're having a thing, and I reach down, and he's doing we're doing a cocktail. He's doing his White Russian. And so we're having this little thing, and I pulled out a cigarette. He looks over at me like he does, and he puts his hand on your forearm, and he goes, "Didn't I tell you? My drivers don't smoke." I looked at him dead in the eyes, put the cigarette out. I said, "You're exactly right, they don't. I never had another cigarette." So for that, I really appreciate that. Yeah. So as we went on, I think about Brad. He was tough, and he wanted a tough driver. He wanted to win. And the problem is we had to race against Jack Roush. And it was the toughest racing I have ever done in my 40-year career. Was the races we ran peerless against Roush. They were tough, they were hard, they were hot. He never gave up. Jack just kept throwing it out there. His cars never got slow, they were always tough. And of course, Brad was the same way. Brad was, he had a different engine under the hood, moving wheelbases around. I never knew what was going on. There was a lot of back and forth. All he wanted me to do was get the job done. Get out there and get it done. I'd be in the car screaming like crazy, hot, this, that, everything going, pushing it or whatever, and calmly would come back to me. This happened every time. Pick it up. Maybe you didn't hear me, Brad. And there were times where I took the radio and threw it out the window. Because I was so he would just calmly pick it up. The other thing Brad would, when I think about Brad, he'd always walk over. We were getting ready to do a street race, I'm sitting there, and I got my open face helmet on, and we're ready to go, we're lined up. And this is tough stuff here. This is gunslinger stuff. And he'd walk over, and he'd always come to the down, kneel down by me, and he says, I want you to have a good time today. I want you to go out there, and I want you to have a good time, Jack. I really do. Yeah. But remember, don't scratch the paint. It was like every time. And it was things like that just made me, I one time said to him, I said, what kind of advice would you give me? He said, learn to feel the grip. And I thought about that. And that changed my entire career right there. Because from that point on, I started thinking about that. I started thinking about the grip. And that made a huge, huge difference. So when I think about Brad was the best, the toughest, the most creative, hard-nosed crew chief I ever drove for. The races that I ran, I've won 40 races, pro races in my life, in a lot of different classes. I've driven everything but Indy cars. And I will have to say that all the racing I did, including Trans Am, the toughest races that I ever ran were the races in that car, driving for Brad racing against you and your team. And those were the toughest. And I remember telling Jack Roush, I think it was a Watkins Glen, I said, you know, when I beat you, it's a big thing. It's because it takes a lot. So I was always very proud every time we came out ahead. So and I appreciate those opportunities. But he made me the driver I was. This car didn't have power steering. It didn't have power steering, power brakes, traction control. It had a lot of horsepower. It's pretty light. It's a big car, but it wasn't a heavy car. 2,700 pounds, he moved around. But he was always playing something. And the car was fast. We had 203 at Daytona in the car. The car was fast. Like Bob said, fearless. I mean, at Phoenix, it would lift the front tires coming out of the corner and send it down, and both front wheels are off the ground. I had horrendous crashes in this car. I survived them. And Brad said, you know, if you ever get in a bad one, he said, if you ever get in a bad one, he said, it's going to shear right here. All these things are going to shear, and this whole frame is going to come. You know what? I had a big wreck at Daytona. They sheared. And I walked away from that one. The other one was a Summit Point when I completely left the racetrack. They couldn't find me for 20 minutes. That's a great story, and it takes a while to tell, but that's an amazing story.
Do tell.
After I got back, well, he was pretty mad. He was pretty mad because, not mad at me, he was mad because they couldn't find me. I know that you and I think Charlie Seelix and, Brad were up in the tower screaming at Raffle, where's my car? And I had gone off the racetrack. You want me to tell the story?
Yes.
There we go. So Summit Point, there's a turn. It was raining, and we were running GTO. We were running against Gurney was there in the GTO cars, in those Toyotas. And the Toyotas were terrible in the rain. Your cars weren't any good in the rain. This car was fantastic in the rain. And so we were in really rainy, cloudy conditions. The race started. It was Goy was leading. Willie was leading. I was behind Willie. Goy was right behind me. And we had broken away from the field. So there was some distance. And there was a turn that had a crest of the hill. So as we come out of the turn, I'm looking, Goy's right behind me. Willie's out there. It's getting ready to rain. You can see the rain. The rain's hitting the windshield. I mean, it's wet. And so Willie's not going to win. I'm going to win. And I know it. I know this. I'm going to win today. So I just need to win this race. So as we come over, we come out of there, Willie goes over. There was two GTU cars. And they were both on the inside of the track where they should be. Well, one of them moved over, and before we got there, and the other one stayed there. And we were lapping that car for the second time. And just as Willie went by, and just as I crested the hill, right at the crest of the hill, it was around about $150, $140, foot flat on the throttle, hard in third, fourth gear. At the moment I crested the hill, the Porsche decided to change lanes. And he came right across in front of me. And my front wheel hit, my right front wheel hit his front left wheel. And they had open fenders in those days. And this car launched like right off the hill, like boom. And the next thing I know, I'm like out there, like, ah. I mean, the car is like this. And I mean, I'm literally like, wow. So the car, it turns around in midair. It got back. It turned around in midair like this, and it came down on its roof backwards. So now I'm on the roof. I'm backwards. The track goes down, and it turns to the right, and then went down and turned like back like that. So all down in here was just wet, like green grass, and there was a big embankment out there with trees on the embankment. trees like this big around, trees. And there was a tire wall, no guardrail. And there was a corner station back here, and there was a corner station around the corner at the left hand right there. So I'm upside down, skidding along. I know this is going to be a big one. I'm looking and I'm seeing just real quiet, and I can hear like, you know. So I flip all the switches off. I always say I reached up to flip them off, but you know, because I'm upside down. And basically, I went down to the grass backwards and hit the embankment, went up, went over again to the tops of the trees, probably got near as high as this, you know, not this high, as high as this hand, but halfway, and went completely out and was gone. There was no tracks. There was nobody saw it. The corner workers didn't see it. Nobody saw it. Gloy was behind me. He hit the back of the Porsche. So Gloy and the Porsche crashed like here. Well, the corner workers ran to Gloy and there was a crash. They just assumed I was gone. You know, that I went ahead, like Willie, right? Everything got red flagged. The cars were coming around. You were there. Mike, we weren't there. Where's Jack? Where's the peerless car? And so they started radioing all the drivers. The drivers that were behind us didn't see me. There were no tracks because the car was on its roof and in wet grass, and it didn't leave any body parts behind. So basically, and all the trees went bent over, and then the trees popped back up. So, and everything was like, and I'm outside on the side, upside down. Now it's starting to rain really hard. They just before this happened, they took the TV down because of lightning. Meanwhile, I'm going to win this race. I was going to win this race. So, next thing I know, I'm outside of the racetrack, and I'm wearing an open face helmet, and I got hit by a tree right here, lucky. Because if it hit me here, it might be a little worse, but hit me right here. So I had a concussion. Back in those days, we didn't know about concussions. I had a bunch of them. So I'm laying on the car. I'm on the door sill. The car's up on its side, and my vision is really blurry. And it's like it would be what it would look like if you were underwater with your eyes open. So I could see things, but you know. So I ended up falling off digging myself out, pulling the cord. I went over the roof of the car, and I was pretty high up, and I fell, and I landed right face first in a big mud puddle. Like, boom! Like that. And I'm laying there. I'm like, and so, you know, I've got a concussion. I can't see. And I don't hear any sounds, and nothing looks like a racetrack. I look around, and there's nothing that looks like a racetrack. There's no guardrail. There's nothing. I mean, where am I? And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, okay, where am I? And you know, so I looked down this road. It was like a 2-lane dirt road that wasn't very used. And one end of the road was dark, and one end of the road was light. So I started walking towards the light end. I didn't know where the road was going, so I trumbled along, and I tripped and fell. And I remember there was a creek, and I fell in the creek because I didn't see the creek. I was like, boom. I'm like, you know. Meanwhile, this is all going on. This is what I'm doing. They're looking for me. They don't know where I'm at. They don't have a clue where I'm at. They're up in the tower. They're talking to all the corner workers, all the guys. Where did he go? Brad is mad. Brad's going, you tell me where my car is, you know, and no one could tell him. No one could give him the answers. So he was pretty hot. And so I found it later. So anyway, so I finally stumble out of the woods. This took a while. This took, you know, and I mean, how long did it take? 15 minutes? I mean, that's a long time. We've red flagged it, and we're sitting there. So I come stumbling out of the woods. I remember there was a cable, and I fell over the cable, fell down again, but I didn't see it. And I'll never forget this girl, and I never saw this girl again. She's a corner worker, and I saw her way off in the distance. And she runs over to me. She throws her hands on my shoulders and she says, "Where have you been?" I'm like, "Over there." You know. So I go back and I lay down on there. Now I'm where the flag station. There's a little bit more to the story. There's a plywood where they stand the flag, right? So I'm laying there. I'm looking up and everything's doing like this. The birdies are a little flying. You know, you see the cartoons, a little birdies, the birdies are flying. So I'm like everything's kind of going around like this, and all of a sudden I see Tom Gloy, like this. I think Tom, and I jump, I say, "Tom, what are you doing here?" I'm fine. You need to get back in the race. And of course, I didn't know, but he had the wreck. So here comes the ambulance. We get in the ambulance, and it's the guy, me, Gloy, and the nurse. And I look over at this guy and I said, "What were you thinking?" He says, "I didn't see you. I guess I wasn't paying attention." At that point, I jumped up and I started beating the hell out of him. I mean, pounding him. So Gloy says to me, Jack, you have to sit down. You have a concussion. You have to stay calm. You stay calm. So he puts me back down. I'm like, okay. And then he starts beating me down. And the nurse jumps on him. So we got this whole thing going on. Then when we get back, and it's the end of the story, then we get back, Brad's there. And Brad gets on him, and it's a big thing. But anyway, that's the story. That's the Summit Point story. And that's it. So in closing, it was wonderful years. We were friends. We were great friends. We had a lot of fun together. We spent a lot of time outside the track. We went to dinner a lot. Brad did more for me than anybody else, and I wouldn't have been the driver I ended up being, and I wouldn't have had the career that I had if it wasn't for Brad Francis, and if it wasn't for having the opportunity to have the little competition racing against the great Jack Rouse Sr. So, thank you.